Jay Parker.
Yes, sir. Joe Webb, what's up?
Man, I'm glad to have you on here. We've been trying to get this together for a minute now.
We have. And as is part of the funeral business, you know, more often than not, things will come up and you'll have to change your plans because you can't plan or decide or dictate when people are going to pass away or not. And
You can't.
This is now the third time that we rescheduled this, which I am grateful we were able to do. But yeah, the first couple of times, I had things come up with work where I had to just politely and kind of with my, head between my legs, I just had to be like, hey, I'm sorry. So sorry. It's last minute. But
so Lord, we appreciate you tonight letting people live.
Always.
We
Absolutely. Yes.
That way we could do the Mic'd Up with Joe Webb show.
That's right. Yeah.
So I'm going to give you a little intro, if that's okay with you.
Sure. Go ahead.
Jay Parker, originally from Dalton, Georgia, the carpet capital of the world.
Absolutely.
You grew up between Dalton and Cartersville.
I did. When I was 12 was when we moved from Dalton to, I say Bartow County. We lived on Highway 41, technically between Adairsville and Cartersville.
Okay.
At the time, so this is like 20 plus years ago, at the time, Cartersville City schools were superior to Bartow County schools, which is whatever. And so we got sent to Cartersville City schools, and just by way of that got involved in the Cartersville community, going to church, school, friends, et cetera. So.
Right. Okay. And you graduated in what, 08?
Mm-hmm.
In 08.
2008. So.
She's a little bit older than me.
17 years ago, which is crazy.
Please don't ever say that again.
Yeah.
Oh, my gosh.
Well, just in case you haven't heard it today, you graduated 14 years ago.
All right, I'm done.
As that
That's
sinks
it.
in, settles in.
So you worked in the restaurant business for 18 years. And we'll
Lord
get
have mercy.
We'll get into that a little bit later.
Sure.
So you worked in a restaurant for 18 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I tried that for a week, by the way,
Mm-hmm.
and we'll get into that. But
I'm glad you got out while you could.
You are now in the funeral business, which is what brought you here.
Absolutely. Full-time funeral business. It is more, it's my job, yes, but at a point, depending on how dedicated and involved you are, it becomes your life.
Right.
Because again, so much of what you do is dictated by powers and things that are outside of your control. So it really does turn into a way of life.
Okay. And you've done that for 7 years, correct?
Going on about 7 years, yeah.
Wow. That's a long time. So you got your feet wet in it.
Well, I've got my feet wet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. When we say a long time, I mean, there are people that have worked in the funeral business or have worked in specific funeral homes, and we probably know some of them. They've been there 30, 40. I mean, there's a guy from my dad's hometown who's a funeral director up there. He's been in that funeral home since 1966. So next year will be 60 years for him at that same funeral home. I mean, it's something that you get into, and a lot of people, you stay in it for life.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
And not only that, you were also ordained to perform baptisms, marriages, burial rites in all 50 states. Is that the right way to say that?
Or we could say burial.
I was about to say, the way I say it in the South is burial.
Yeah, burial. Yeah, I can marry, bury, and baptize.
That makes sense.
Legally speaking, depending on where you are with your relationship with the Lord or religiously, spiritually, etc., I may not be your guy because I don't have any training in that sort, but legally speaking, if you've got the proper documentation and you need somebody to do it, I am more than happy to assist where
That's
I can.
awesome. I really think that's cool.
Mm-hmm.
When me and my wife got married, we had someone that I guess he was in the same he had the same, was it licensing or kinda however that works? Yeah.
Licensing, ordination. Yeah.
Great guy too. Shout out Levi. But you're also on your way to becoming a licensed funeral director.
Which is
Cool.
correct. That is
cool.
correct.
Awesome.
There's so a lot of people don't realize, because you don't need to realize or think about it, but a lot of people don't realize, a lot of people who make up the funeral business, the workers, if you will.
Yeah.
It's not just funeral directors and embalmers. You got plenty of those, but you've also got people who all they do is go on removals, which are exactly what they sound like, removals. They pick up people who have died, bring them into the care of the funeral home. You've got people who, secretaries, receptionists, business managers who do nothing but file death certificates, work with insurance paperwork, manage the business ends of a funeral home, whatever they may be. You've got people who sell what we call pre-need, which is literally what it sounds like. You're selling funeral services to people before they need them, helping them pre-plan and pre-arrange and set up what they want to have done.
So maybe it could take a little stress off the family one day.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, you think about it, somebody in your family dies, whether it's expected or unexpected, and obviously you're sad, you're grieving, you're shocked, whatever. Well, you're not probably in the best headspace to have a $15,000 bill put in front of you.
I could only imagine.
So, yeah, so people who do pre-need, that, they try to alleviate that also.
Right.
And this is my one shout out that I guess I will give specifically, because I don't feel like they get enough recognition. I feel like they're the most underrated people in the business. But the men, and there are some women, but not very many, but the men and women who work in the cemeteries, whether they're digging graves,
oh my gosh,
whether they're setting vaults, whether they're placing monuments, markers, headstones, all of that. I mean, they have physically speaking, labor-wise, they have the hardest job, the nastiest, the messiest. I mean, like if it's, freezing cold outside, if it's pouring rain, I mean, you never know what you might see as far as they're concerned. And yeah, we couldn't do what we do if it weren't for what they do.
The actual grave digger.
The actual grave digger.
The actual grave digger.
There are still
truck.
actual grave diggers, and there are still a lot of cemeteries, especially here in the South, where you can't physically get a tractor into that cemetery. So you have to dig a grave by hand. Absolutely.
Oh my gosh.
All the time.
Wow.
Hand dig a grave, start to finish.
I've been out of the labor work for a while, so when I hear digging, that sounds that sounds awful.
So, like I said, they shout out to anybody and everybody that works in a cemetery anywhere in any capacity, because I couldn't do what they do, and it's just they're awesome.
Well, and I want to get into it a little later. When I was planning for this interview, I was talking to Megan about the mental health state of that whole thing. It's a constant, and I don't want to jump off in that yet.
Sure.
But there's a constant aura of death always around. And that's gotta, I would say in a way, kind of twist into a little bit of a darker realm and depression maybe, or.
It can. I mean, certainly for a lot of people, depending on what they see or what they experience.
Right.
The funeral business, and I'm sure there's a lot of businesses and industries that are like this, but the funeral business is one where, so take my guy that I mentioned a minute ago who's worked at the same funeral home since 1966. It doesn't matter if you've been in the business for 5 years or 50 years. You're working alongside of people who are seeing new things that they've never seen before every single day. You're constantly learning. You're constantly, growing, evolving, however you want to say it. So I say that to say you never know when something might happen. I saw on television one time it was a documentary about a funeral director who was in Oklahoma City, and he was living and working as a funeral director in Oklahoma City when the bombing happened.
No kidding.
And obviously that was not expected, but he was one of the funeral directors who became involved in the situation of trying to serve those families of their loved ones had been killed in that attack. And I don't know how long he'd been in the business. I mean, he was a seasoned director, but I mean, that was something that he had never, how can you imagine or prepare for something like that? And it did take a really serious toll on him. And I honestly don't remember how the show ended, so I don't remember if we had a happy ending or not. But
Yeah.
there's things like that.
Yeah.
You know, you're
Mhm.
always so you just when you think you've seen it all, or just when you think you might have seen the strangest or the most unusual
Yeah.
thing, something else will happen.
Man, do I got some questions for you. So
I'll
they're
be-
gonna come.
Okay.
I hope you're ready. They're gonna come. We got some
Yeah.
we got some good ones. Nothing crazy, but we got some there's a lot of questions out there that people so most people have no idea of that industry until
Right.
it's their family in there or friend or their self, right?
Correct.
So, and not only that, a lot of people don't have to deal with the arrangements of it.
Correct. Exactly.
A lot of people just attend the funeral.
Right.
And that's why I wanted to bring you in. I thought it was really cool when you reached out to me, simply because well, for one, I'd like to learn. I think it's cool. I think it's definitely cool to learn. But
yeah.
and also just to bring light to it, to let people know that, hey, Jay's got a cool job too. Hear his job. But anyway, let's dive off into this childhood of yours. I want to hear.
Okay.
Where did you? I know you grew up Dalton.
Right.
Give me the upbringing and all that fun stuff.
Yeah. So nothing too crazy or out of the ordinary. You know, my parents were amazing. When I was 5, the year that I turned 6 was when my sister was born. So I grew up with a little sister. Mom still is a musician. So I had a lot of musical influence in my life. I guess the only thing about me, as far as being a child, that was really kind of unique or different was around the time that I was 5 or 6, and I went to my first funeral, and I was just enamored. I was in awe. Just the whole experience and what was happening, and just from that point forward, you know, here I was, this little 6, 7, 8, however year old kid, and I talked about it all the time. I was always curious. This is a true story, when we would visit different towns, like the town where my dad is from in Virginia, I wanted to go to the funeral homes and meet the funeral directors and take a tour of their funeral home.
No way.
This is before I was like 10 years old. So imagine
it hit you that fast.
It did. Well,
Wow.
that young, I mean, for sure. And yeah, it was something that I always maintained an interest in, and beyond just a simple interest. I mean, it was something that I got like passionately involved in, like reading about and learning about and talking to as many people as I could whenever I could. So that was, you know, I would say in a very unusual sort of way, that was a pretty significant part of my childhood.
Right.
Was the fact that I wanted to be in the funeral business, and I was so interested in it. Because, so imagine this. So your parents of a 9, 10-year-old, an elementary schooler, and they're talking about, you know, funeral homes all day long. And they kind of fit like that profile you just said. You know, they don't know anything special about the business or any more than the average person. And here your kid is talking about the funeral business all the time. It's a little strange.
Yeah. How did your parents feel about it?
My dad was always really interested in it. So Dad had a history when he was way younger. He worked in the cemetery business, going back to cemeteries. He worked in the cemetery business for several years. So he had an insight into it. He didn't know the ins and outs of the funeral business, but at least it was something like it was on his radar, let's say. My mom was always, and lovingly I say this, she was always just freaked the hell out. I mean, she was she's
like
one
most
of
people, I would
like most people. Absolutely, you know, and I think for her specifically, you know, she probably had experiences as a child, you know, when you see your first person that is dead in a casket, whatever, you go to your first funeral, and you know, and it can be a very unusual and unsettling experience. And so I think that for my mom specifically, that was probably something that shaped a lot of how she felt for a long time.
Right.
Yeah.
Where did you go to elementary school and middle school?
So I went to I went to a couple of different elementary schools. So, oh gosh, I have to think way back. So I went to Varnell Elementary School for kindergarten for my first year.
Okay.
So then after that, and I don't really recall like the discussions or the reasoning or what went into it, but mom and dad pulled me out of school and homeschooled me for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
In 2 years' time, I completed at home first, second, and third grades. So you can say, that I skipped a grade, whatever. I didn't really skip a grade. I just did 3 grades in 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
When I went back to elementary school, 4th grade, I was back in Whitfield County schools. Went to middle school in Whitfield County. And then, of course, that was the year, or not the year, excuse me, but that was the time period that we moved from Whitfield to Bartow County.
Right. Okay.
So, and it was something, going back to like what we were saying about, me being a kid and being interested in business. It was something I openly and freely talked about in school as well.
So coming from someone that went to Cass High School, I've always wondered this.
Okay.
What's your biggest difference between? Did you ever go to a public school?
Oh yeah, of course.
Okay.
That's all I did.
What is your biggest difference
between?
You went to Cartersville High School, correct?
Correct.
And public school like Bartow County, Cass High, Adairsville High.
You mean like city versus county schools?
Yes.
That's a great question. At the time, and I will say this on the record. To my knowledge, the Bartow County school system has never been bad by any means, but I think there was a period of time where, maybe it was based on public opinion or whatever, but the city school system was regarded as being, a step above. And that was how I wound up at Cartersville. But I don't really feel like, from an experience standpoint, it was much of a different experience at Cartersville, the city school, as it would have been at Cass or at Woodland or at Adairsville or one of the county schools.
Except Cartersville gets quarterbacks like Trevor Lawrence.
Yes.
That
so
does
this
happen.
was so I went to Cartersville. You say BC before Christ, of course. I went to Cartersville BTL before Trevor Lawrence.
Okay.
So this was before all that happened and took place.
Who was the other? Someone else played football for Cartersville.
Ronnie Brown.
Ronnie Brown.
Yeah.
Or was that way before your time?
No, if I remember my dates correctly, I think that Ronnie graduated in 2004, which would have been spring of 2004, and then I would have started high school fall of 2004.
Okay.
Because I'm pretty sure that was the time period that he was at. I'm wanting to say he was at LSU.
Perfect.
Was it LSU?
Oh my gosh, man!
I think it was LSU or Auburn. He went off to a big SEC school. I'm fairly certain it was LSU. Gosh, I'm embarrassing myself by not knowing. But anyway, yeah.
If you ask me, I'm gonna embarrass myself even more. So I'm a diehard baseball fan, but and I'm a casual football watcher. That's what I tell people.
Yes.
I casually watch football, but I love baseball.
Yeah.
So I can tell you a lot about baseball.
Yeah.
But anyway, so pre funeral life.
Mm-hmm.
What were some of the jobs that you had growing up?
So pretty much.
Because I know it was restaurant industry.
Yeah, pretty much nonstop restaurant business.
Really?
Serving mostly. I worked at a very popular, very well-known, I guess you could say high-end resort property that's in Bartow County. I worked there for a number of years, and we all know who it is, but I'm not going to give them a plug because they're a much different place now than they were then.
Okay.
Which is neither good nor bad.
Okay.
It just is what it is.
Perfect.
But I worked there for a number of years, and at that time, that company was structured so that, you may be based in the restaurant, but if there's a big wedding going on and they need somebody to help with the banqueting side of things, you go work a banquet over here. So I kind of worked throughout that whole property in little bits and pieces as far as the restaurant business goes.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, now there was a period of time for about a year and a half. Well, it was about a year and a half in Atlanta, and then about 6 months in Birmingham. I was with the same company, but I was actually working in the special events business, kind of that came from that other job that I had. I was working in the special events business, doing like rentals, like big tents and dance floors and
Yeah.
all that stuff. Like you go to a big wedding and all the stuff that makes it cool and pretty. I was working for the industry that helped supply all that stuff.
Yeah.
But even with all that going on, you know, at some point I would get to a place where I would either be bored or I would need money or some combination of both, and I would pick up another restaurant job. And so I would work nights, weekends in the restaurant. And it just kind of ebbed and flowed. You know, there were years where I'd be full-time serving whatever. There'd be times where I was full-time, you know, equipment rental, and then waiting tables at night and on the weekends.
So I know you said when you were a kid you started getting interested in that type of lifestyle, the funeral lifestyle, and after the restaurant business, what pulled you into actually pursuing that as a profession?
Oh, absolutely. You know, it's one of those things where I never lost interest in it. I never forgot about it.
No kidding.
But for whatever reason, you know, it never did fully click of this is what I need to go do.
Okay.
Or this is what I'm supposed to be doing. That just, I don't know why, but that just didn't happen.
We all land in certain jobs that we have no idea how we landed there. So.
Well, and I think, you know, at least I can say for a lot of restaurant and service people, you know, because I guess a lot of restaurant people get asked a lot, you know, they're like, oh, are you in school or are you this or are you that? There's like that that underlying assumption that you're doing your restaurant job to get to somewhere else.
No, there is. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So I found myself in that situation a lot. And I was 27 years old. It was when I was still living in Birmingham. And I was actually in a Piggly Wiggly buying the ingredients to make spaghetti. And I don't know what I saw. I don't know what I heard. I don't know what exactly happened. But it was there in that grocery store in Birmingham that it just clicked with me. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And just in my mind, so like I'm in the grocery store. I've got a buggy. I've got stuff in my buggy. And I'm just thinking, and I'm having this like life-altering epiphany. And I'm just like, you know, I've always been interested in this business, the technical stuff of this business, and you can define that however you want to. It doesn't bother me. It doesn't gross me out. To the contrary, I'm interested in it. I love learning about it. This is what goes into making somebody who is supposed to be in this business. Why am I not doing this? And so from that moment forward, that was when I knew that this was where I was supposed to be. And again, I was 27 in a Piggly Wiggly. I was getting ingredients to make spaghetti. And somewhere in the mix there, I called my dad and I told him, I said, you know, I've decided I'm going to pursue the funeral business. And for all that I knew about the funeral business, at that point, I had no idea how to even begin to try to get a job.
And what did your dad do? I know you said he was a grave digger for a little bit.
Oh, when he was young, when he was a kid, yeah.
So what did he do?
He worked in a variety of different sales positions for a long time, mainly. So what actually brought him to Dalton was he worked in the freight business.
Okay.
Because, you know, you got Dalton making a lot of carpet. Well, you got to have freight to get it gone to wherever it's going.
Right.
But for the last many years, he's actually been the photographer for the newspaper in Cartersville.
No kidding.
He's always done photography.
Sweet.
At kind of like with me in restaurant, he's done photography at like varying levels, like more, you know, full-time, part-time, freelance, whatever. But at that point, he had already gone to work for the newspaper, and he was there, and that's where he still is.
So let's get into that later, because I want to talk about that newspaper. That's really cool.
Okay.
My biggest question was kind of what was his reaction when you said, you know, hey, I want to go into this?
From
lifestyle?
the best I remember, I mean, he was like, yeah, absolutely. You know, he was very supportive. My dad's always been very diplomatic and very, you know,
Is it supporting?
It's very supporting,
Okay.
very supportive, but very diplomatic and very fact, kind of black and white, talking about like well we can work on this and we can talk to this person and he was he was just all in.
That's
He
awesome.
yeah, um, and my mom was too. I don't
Mhm.
remember exactly how or when I told her, but she was all in as well. And I think when I kind of explained it, to them, and to whomever else I told it to, I told them, I said, hey, I just kind of realized all these things and they've just all clicked at one time. And everybody's kind of like, well, yeah, well, if, um, just being really specific, if being in an embalming room doesn't make you sick to your stomach, then yeah, maybe you should think about working in the embalming room or working in a funeral home, so,
True.
yeah, stuff like that.
So this is gonna. So we're gonna start getting into the, I guess you would say the job aspect of it. Um, and I know this is when all the volumes go up on the TV. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So
With the proliferation of social media, so YouTube,
100%.
TikTok,
Yeah.
all that, I mean, there you don't have to search far before you start finding funeral professionals who are making videos about anything funeral related.
Doing
A
what we're
lot of
doing
it's
right here.
really interesting. Um, some of it is way more, in my opinion, way more graphic than it needs to be. Some of it is very biased, like people who are very biased as far as their opinions on the business.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, this is where the volume gets turned up, and this is where the kids who are scrolling on TikTok and they come across, these are the things that they, pay attention to and hone in on.
So let's start right here. So someone dies
Mm-hmm.
just like that. What's the day to day look like?
So first of all, more often than not,
Mm-hmm.
you hope that someone is passing away, and it's, I hate to say expected versus unexpected, but you hope it's in a situation like, say, someone's on hospice.
Of course, of course.
Okay, so we'll go that route. So someone is on hospice, they've been sick, and they finally passed. Well, a medical professional, usually an RN,
Mm-hmm.
will pronounce what's called pronounce that they have passed away, which basically just means, that they no longer have any signs of life and they are, in fact, deceased.
Okay.
Coroners can do that.
Mm-hmm.
Registered nurses can do that. Medical doctors can do that. Outside of those three people, professions, licenses, etc., I don't know if anybody else can technically pronounce a death. But anyway, so the person is pronounced, and then someone either oh, go ahead.
Whether that's at a hospital or say someone's home
Yes.
or a wreck.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Etc.
Yes. Those are all good examples. So, like when my grandmother passed away, which was back in August.
Now, were those people on call also?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. When my grandmother passed away, which was back in August, she was under hospice care.
Sorry about that.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. She was under hospice care.
Mm-hmm.
We knew she was going to pass, and she did, of course. Well, the hour and the day and time that she passed, of course, there was nobody there. So I called the hospice whose care she was under, and the person that was on call answered. I told them who I was and that I was, fairly certain my grandmother had passed.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, we're so sorry. We'll have, someone there shortly. And so within 30 minutes, one of their nurses arrives at my grandmother's, it is, arrives at her residence and, pronounces that she, has passed away.
Okay.
So once that happens, then, either the nurse, or if it's at a hospital, a doctor, if it's like you're saying a wreck or situation, a coroner, somebody who is, in that position is who makes the death call. I've never known of or been familiar with any funeral homes or funeral businesses who take death calls from families. I mean, a family can certainly call a funeral home and tell them, hey, granddad passed away. And the funeral home's response is most likely going to be, well, is he under the care of a doctor? Is he on hospice, et cetera? And the funeral home is going to graciously and kind of politely get them to have whatever medical professional is involved call the funeral home.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Okay. How does the body get to the funeral home?
So Once all that has been said and done, more often than not, the funeral home themselves, and when I say more often than not, there are such things as transport services, which we can talk about in a minute. But whoever is on call from the funeral home. Now, if this is during the day, like business hours, if you will, then it's,
call an Uber or something.
Yeah. You've got plenty of people at work already, so they just, stop what they're doing, get whatever they need together and they go. If it's in the middle of the night, or if it's an odd day or time or a holiday, then yeah, whoever is on call, which I have shifts every week that I'm on call to take calls if anything comes in. That person, you stop what you're doing, you get ready, you go to the funeral home, get the equipment that you need, get your vehicle that you need.
Oh, okay. So oh, wow.
Absolutely.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Absolutely.
So I was always under the assumption that the coroner.
No.
Oh, wow.
No. So when I say things like, that this is a way of life, like what I'm talking about, like this whole area,
yeah,
becomes just a part of who you are. Like, so my nights that I'm on call, I don't make plans to do anything. I don't make plans to go anywhere. I may go to a restaurant in Dalton or something, but I don't, it's just kind of understood that you're readily available to stop what you're doing and go take care of that.
Now,
if the need arises.
Do you take the hearse?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
We do.
Okay.
Our funeral home does.
Right.
There are a lot of funeral homes who have moved to other types of vehicles, whether they're like unmarked SUVs or unmarked vans.
And just use the hearse as a ceremonial.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Perfect.
Correct.
Those have really stepped up too.
Oh yeah.
Those are sick.
Oh, absolutely.
Some of them, that sounds weird, but some of them are pretty sick.
They are.
Like Cadillacs and things like that.
So, it was making the rounds on social media, the hearse that they built that's carrying President Carter, Jimmy Carter, who is obviously just passed away.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a brand new, beautiful, top of the line. In those circles, you'd call it coach. You'd say the funeral coach.
Oh, wow.
I mean, yeah, but like you're saying, sick,
So, this is where it gets nasty.
Okay.
Well, maybe not yet.
Okay.
Well, yeah, probably. All right, so you got to load it down. So I joke a lot. So if I make a little joke,
oh, absolutely,
God forgive me.
Of course.
Once you load up the meat wagon, you take it.
I've heard a lot of different phrases and expressions. That's a new one on me. That's fantastic.
Once you load it up, you get it back to the house, what I'll call it. Or the funeral home. And where's the process go? How does it start?
Let's step aside for just a minute,
Okay.
because there's a part of this we're skipping over that I think may be of interest. And we will get back to that.
Perfect.
It's only been within like the last 10 years, and some funeral homes even more recent than that, like the last 5 years, that funeral directors and on-call staff, part-time people that work at the funeral home, it's only been very recently that they have stopped staying at the funeral homes. Like, that used to be the thing.
You were on call at the funeral
Somebody
home.
stayed at the funeral home every single night. So you may have a schedule where it's like every 6 days. So you and I, or you or I, whatever, we may have 2 days. Then it rotates to the next person. Then they have 2 days. Then it rotates to the next person. And then they have 2 days. Until the proliferation of cell phones, and even since cell phones, that was the thing. If you called the funeral home's number, you were getting someone at the funeral home. They were staying there in a room that was appointed, with beds, couches, TVs, whatever, much like a fire department type situation.
Type thing, yeah.
Yeah. Somebody was always at the funeral home.
Wow.
And even before that, well, not before that, but like as a part of that, a lot of funeral directors, when landlines were the thing, funeral directors would have one of the funeral home's landlines run into their home. So if you were on call for that night, you would just turn the volume up on that phone. So if the funeral home number rang, you'd hear it ring in your house. But if you're not on call, you just turn the volume down.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, dude. I
No
mean,
kidding.
again, when I say that the funeral business is a way of life, it is very much a way of life.
That is so awesome.
Yeah. But so back to what you were asking. Once you get back to the funeral home with
Uh-huh.
the body, what happens?
First off, I want to
Uh-huh.
ask you, what is it like? So when it's you
Mm-hmm.
and the body.
Mm-hmm.
What is that like?
That's a really good question. You know, honestly, it's very it's got a heaviness to it, man.
Oh yeah, I mean I
It
can only
really
assume.
does. It's not weird or creepy or anything like that, but it's like, you just knowing and having that mental and emotional process play out in your head of like, you've got someone's mother
Oh
or
yeah.
you've got someone's grandfather that's now in your care. And with me, of course things hit me differently. Some days I'm in different moods, we all are. But I try to never lose sight of that. I never look at whomever we're taking care of. It's not just that they're the body. It's like, no, that's someone's whomever, someone's mom, dad, sister.
Of course, yeah.
And so again, the word that I use that I associate that was it's got a heaviness to it.
Of course.
And it's a privilege and it's an honor because you when you're going into that situation when someone has literally just passed away, if the family is there, family's not always there, but if the family is there, you're the first person that they're speaking to, reaching out to, and so
Wow.
and it doesn't take anything like any there's no real level of training or anything. It just takes being able to be genuinely kind and present in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
What? So you pull up
Mhm.
back to the funeral home.
Mhm.
Where does the process go before the family comes in to make arrangements?
Yeah, absolutely. So if it's during the day, then of course you bring the body into the funeral home. If the body is going to be embalmed, then
Mm-hmm.
typically the embalmer will go ahead and start things on their end. If it's at the end of, or it's not the end of, excuse me, if it's in the middle of the night, we've got provisions by which we, safely and delicately, place, the body so that they can stay for the duration of the night without anyone having to do anything right then or anybody having to basically sit with them, if you will. There's protocols for all of that. And then there are some funeral homes where, regardless of the day or night or hour, whatever, they'll come in and embalm in the middle of the night if that's part of what's going to happen with that person and if that's what that family wants.
So if it's not done that night, so the body literally just lays.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Again, and there's
what does a body do after I guess the last breath? I've always heard that the body releases. I'm in the
so the proper and the non-graphic way to explain that, because you're not wrong, but the proper and the non-graphic way to explain that is you've got all kinds of muscles and organs and things that are working without you even realizing. And so once the body once there's no longer any signs of life, all of those things stop working. Whether it means they relax, whether it means that they start to change color, all of that begins happening. The body immediately begins to change upon death. And there's I have never seen or experienced, there's no, I don't want to say right or wrong, no two are ever exactly the same.
Mm-hmm.
It depends on all kinds of different factors.
Does the body do anything? I guess what I'm trying to say, the body do anything weird?
No.
Doesn't you hear like
stories
say
of
the
bodies,
body moved or something crazy?
Yeah, no. And anybody who says that they've seen that is I say this with love. Anybody who says they've seen that is either hallucinating or just outright, yeah, no, that doesn't happen.
Okay.
That doesn't happen. Bodies don't sit up. I've heard that one. No.
Yeah, because that would be my last day in that business.
I think it would be mine too. Actually, it would be mine too.
So say you leave the body overnight, right?
Uh-huh.
Your next day, what does it look like?
So more likely than not, most funeral homes have some sort of, sheltering where they will keep the body, similar to that of a cooler, refrigerator.
Okay,
whatever.
yeah.
I hate saying refrigeration when talking about people who have died because it's like you refrigerate food. You don't refrigerate people, and it drives me crazy if I ever see on like a funeral home's general price list, they'll actually have that as a charge. It's like refrigeration, such and such per day.
Oh, no kidding.
Yes, and it just, I know a lot of people read it and it doesn't phase them one way or the other, but my thing is like, it's like I refrigerate my leftovers, or I refrigerate the food that I've bought for this winter storm that's coming up. I don't refrigerate someone's loved one.
You had a word for that the other day. What was that word? Going to Chili's. Going to Chili's. Going to Chili's. She said that. So we talked about she's in the medical profession, so she's got some funny lingo too, and I throw some military lingo at her sometimes, and we got some
of course
some fun stuff. But anyway, back to it.
So just basically, kind of the overall idea behind it is, the cold slows down decomposition. So you make sure that the body is properly and safely sheltered in whatever means necessary.
Okay.
And then what did you ask? What happens the following day, or what happens when
the following day?
Yeah.
So kind of going into what is your first step, and what do you lead into? I guess it's the embalming process. Is that?
Well, it's several things that happen kind of all at once. If we're going along still with the the idea of somebody who's died overnight, or say died during we'll just say a non-traditional hour, more likely than not, that family is probably not slept. So it's kind of courteous to maybe wait till a respectable hour of the morning, certainly not first thing at 8 a.m., but maybe like 10:30 a.m. You give that family a call. And, if you're not the one who they dealt with during the removal, like you're a new person, of course you would introduce yourself.
Okay.
And then kind of from there, get their idea of when they want to come in and make arrangements.
Okay. And is that when they would decide if they want to do the embalming process, or not embalming process, the
burial or cremation?
Yes, cremation or burial.
More often than not.
Okay.
Families know that going in.
Okay.
Whether it's been through their loved one expressed
Is that something they told you previous to you bringing the bodies to the funeral home?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'd say it's probably about half and half.
Okay.
If you're picking somebody up from a hospital or a long-term care facility, and there's no family there, you're just interacting with medical staff. Well, you obviously don't know what that family's wishes may be, so you don't know if they're going to bury or cremate. Occasionally, they may have told someone there that they're going to bury or they're going to cremate, but you more likely than not don't know.
Okay.
When you're dealing with the family directly in that moment, again, more often than not, they'll tell you, Mama's got a burial space at this cemetery, or she's going to be buried, next to whomever, or there's like, we're going to cremate and her cremains are going to be, inurned. That's the word. Inurned in the columbarium. That's another word. They usually know these things.
Okay.
Usually.
So before you'd even do anything to the body, the family has to come in first to get the process started.
You have to get, if we're talking about embalming specifically,
right,
you have to get the family's permission.
Okay.
Now, you can accept verbal permission. Some funeral homes don't. They make you sign something. And that's totally, as I understand it, that's totally up to the discretion of every funeral home, every business. But there are a lot of funeral homes where a verbal authorization, you know, is sufficient. They will verbally tell you, yes, you can go ahead and embalm. And then, then the process would take place either that same day if it's during the day, or first thing the next day.
Okay. How does the embalming process work?
That's a good question. The embalming process, so a couple of misunderstandings, maybe, I guess, for lack of a better word. The embalming process does not stop decomposition. It just slows it down.
Ooh.
That's
Did not know
that's a
that.
big thing to keep in mind. That is
Wow.
a huge thing to keep in mind. It just slows the process down. It's also not required by law. However, privately owned funeral homes are able to obviously dictate, their own rules as far as their business goes. So every funeral home that I have ever known of or worked with, it's always been a rule that if there's going to be a public viewing, the funeral home required embalming. That is completely legit. And I've also never, well, maybe a couple of times, but I've also never really dealt with or experienced any families who wanted to view their loved one sans embalming because...
Explain it for someone maybe that doesn't understand. What is embalming a body? What is it? What is it for? What is it? How does that?
So when you watch like NCIS or Law and Order or some show where someone is dead, it's all very staged. Somebody's like, dead people don't look that way.
Right.
That's not how you look when you pass away. A lot of times your eyes may be wide open, your mouth may be wide open. If you've been sick for a long time, maybe you're a gentleman who hasn't had the ability to shave your face in a month, and so you look really disheveled. There can be a number of things that affect or that go into affecting how you physically look once you die. So the embalming process attempts to bring some reasonable restorative measure to making that person look like they should. Respectful, clean and presentable, while again slowing the decomposition process down so that if you're going to have a viewing in, say, 3 days, 5 days, whatever, the body is obviously going to, for lack of better words, hold up for that long. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So
that's if somebody asked me what is embalming or what does embalming do, that is the answer that I would give without anybody specifically asking me technical things, which is totally fine to do, because I'm sure you're probably going to. But that is what I would tell a family member if they're like, why should we have our loved one embalmed? I would say, well, and then I would explain exactly what I just said.
So I've always, I don't know where, this is gonna sound crazy.
Hit me.
So I don't know where I got this from. Shouldn't have done it. There's a funeral home.
You can say names if you want to. I just
Well, we was trying not to say any names.
Absolutely.
This podcast, but it's nothing bad. But I had heard from someone from the Parney Jennings Funeral Home, right? Someone had told me a long time ago that they had heard from the outside, it's like they're sucking the organs out of the body. Is that a thing? Or do all the organs stay in the body?
All of the organs stay in the body.
Oh,
I've heard varying versions of that too. I think what a lot of people hear or confuse with embalming is an autopsy process, which in an autopsy, more often than not, the organs are removed from the body for various pathological reasons.
Okay.
But no, just the standard embalming process, you're not, taking someone apart or anything. That's not a thing.
So it's literally they die or they pass away,
Mm-hmm.
you slow the process down of decay
Mm-hmm.
to the point till you can put them in the earth.
Yes.
Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay. So trauma.
Uh-huh.
That's my biggest question.
Absolutely.
Gunshot wounds.
Mm-hmm.
Really bad car accidents.
Mm-hmm.
Self-inflicted gunshot wounds, things like that. And I don't mean this in any disrespect to anybody that's ever
Sure.
had to deal with that. This is totally just for, just a learning process. And if that does offend anybody, I do apologize. But it's something good to kind of understand. How does all
Absolutely.
of that work? If you say you have to take care of someone that
So there is such a thing as, I don't know if there's a specific title, but for lack of better words, restorative embalmers. There are embalmers whose specialty by way of their training, their experience, what they're passionate about, is they specifically help to restore bodies that have experienced significant trauma.
okay.
Like a bad car accident where maybe someone has been thrown forward and their face planted into the glass of a windshield. There are embalmers who, have had practice and have artistic skill that they would attempt to try to restore that and make it so that it didn't look the way that it did. Now, that's obviously not always possible. In the same stride, it's important to understand too, you can never, you can never, and you should never deny a family the right to see their loved one specifically because of trauma. I've never known of a family that wanted to see their loved one in that kind of state.
I would assume, yeah.
But just so it's on the record, because this is something I think a lot of people get confused by. Yeah, you have the right to see your loved one in whatever condition at whatever point during the process.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So
have you ever been a part of a cremation process?
Oh, absolutely. I'm several years ago, and there's a lot of people who are, but I do have my cremate. What am I even trying to say? I'm a certified cremation operator. I have my license to operate a cremation machine. That's not to say that I do, but I have in the past. I've done many cremations myself. Funeral homes I've worked at in the past have had their own crematories on site. So myself and other individuals at that place were licensed to do the cremation. See, there's different licenses for everything.
I can only imagine.
But to answer your question, yes, I have been a part of many cremations.
And there's been a lot of funeral homes out there that have done some wicked, crazy stuff to cause people to have all these
no, you're exactly right. That's if you want to kind of get down to why there is so much licensure and so much legality and so many rules in the funeral business, pretty much all of it stems from, a tragic event of some sort where a family was mistreated or their loved one was mishandled or whatever the case may be. Yeah, you're exactly right.
Before we go into that cremation process,
Mm-hmm.
how is the body... what am I trying to say? How is the body injected with the embalming fluid? How does that work?
Sure. So up here, your clavicle, your collarbone.
Okay.
Right around your clavicle you have your two carotid arteries. You have your right common carotid and your left common carotid. So your arterial system in your body is what sends blood out. Your heart pumps blood out through your arteries, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So you go in. This is how most embalmings happen. There's obviously cases where it can't be done this way and you have to do different things, but most embalmings happen the way I'm about to describe. The right common carotid is where the embalmer, makes an incision. They go in, they locate that vessel. They, with their embalming machine that they've mixed their embalming solution in, which contains a lot of preservatives, formaldehyde-based products. They have, tools and hoses and whatnot that they use to connect and basically affix that into the person's, to the body's carotid artery. And so you set that up. Simultaneously, you locate the jugular vein. So your veins are what deliver blood back to your heart.
Mm-hmm.
So arteries out, veins in.
Uh-huh.
So the vein you locate as well.
She gave me a lesson on this last night.
Oh, did she? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's part of what you learn in mortuary school, which I have gone to a good bit of mortuary school. I'm not finished. But you learn all about the arterial system, the venous system. You learn all the different veins, the subclavian, brachial, aorta, femoral,
kidding.
right common carotid. Yeah, you learn all that stuff and where it all is and,
That is
and all
awesome.
that.
How do you know when you've been successful at embalming the body?
Mm-hmm.
Is there something that happens? Does it start coming back out when you get it full? Kind of what happens?
So you open up the jugular vein.
Uh-huh.
So basically, you have, let's say, just your one point right here where you're injecting and draining simultaneously. And of course, as fluid is being injected in, blood is then obviously draining out. You can go based on that as far as knowing success or not, but you see a lot of changes start to happen with the body as
Maybe
far as
I missed that. So the embalming fluid goes in
yes,
and pushes
the blood out.
Oh, wow.
So you replace the blood throughout the circulatory system. You replace it with the formaldehyde-based, let's say, preservative.
Yeah.
Because that's what this is all in the spirit of, is, preservation.
Man, if we advanced, we used to wrap people up.
Oh, absolutely. Hey, it all, in some way or another, comes back to and comes from old traditions like that. The old Egyptian traditions.
Yeah.
Ways that they looked at death, ways that they treated their deceased.
Okay.
A big part of embalming, though, and that this doesn't ever get really thought about because, like we said a minute ago, people are always interested in the technical, the scientific, some would say the gory, even though I don't like that word. A big part of embalming is just cosmetic stuff, making sure that someone's eyes are properly closed, making sure that the mouth is properly closed.
How do you do this?
It's really not that exciting or complicated with the eyes specifically. So think like hard plastic contact lenses. There's eye caps that go in under the eyelids, and you position the eyelids shut in a natural looking way. Mouths, there's a couple of different ways you can close mouths, and every embalmer has, at least every embalmer I've ever worked along with, has their different ways of what they prefer. And they always swear that this way is the best, and they'll tell you why the other way doesn't work. There's the needle injector method, and then there's the suture method. The needle injector is basically a device that drives a wire into the gums. And I'm pointing to this side because when you're laying in a casket, this is your viewing side. So more often than not, if an embalmer is using the needle injector to close a mouth, they'll do this side because this is the side away from where people are viewing, if that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah,
not that you can see it anyway, but just
extra precaution.
Yeah, sure.
Mm-hmm.
So the needle injector drives the wires into the gums, and then once you've done that, you can pull the mouth into place, and then think just like twist ties. You twist the wires together so that it holds the mouth shut. And, you can use like mouth formers and things, which look kind of like sports mouth guards, to kind of go inside under the lips in the person's mouth. A lot of embalmers get creative and use cotton in how they help make the face, specifically with the mouth, fill it back up so that it looks natural. The suture method is, I don't know if you'd say more old school. Some would probably say it is. But it's very surgical kind of in nature. So there's these S hook things that you use. You load up with suture thread, and then you basically go through and sew the mouth shut.
Mm.
And
Okay.
that's how you close eyes and close mouths. That's a big, I mean, so think about it on this side. That's a big thing for a family. If you walk in and you see your loved one and their eyes look weird or their mouth looks, or whatever,
Would be
that's going to be
very
bad,
traumatizing.
very traumatizing. Exactly. So that all is just as important of the embalming process as anything scientific or chemical or fluid related.
Okay.
Things like fingernails, you clip and trim fingernails. Like I mentioned a few minutes ago, facial hair, like if it's a man who's been sick for a long time and hasn't been able to shave, and he was normally clean shaven, you shave the body. And then bathing the body as well. You bathe the body, shampoo, the person's hair, just things that, again, you're doing it in the spirit of this is someone's loved one, and you want for them to be taken the best care of.
Okay.
Because to you or to somebody it may just be a body, but to the family you're serving, that is their blank.
Okay.
So that's, I guess the reason I keep coming back to that is, like, for a lot of embalmers, that is why they are so passionate about what they do. They're not, weird, macabre, scientific geek nerds. They're really big about, this is someone's whomever, and it's their privilege and their opportunity to get to make that person, look the way that they need to look.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
No, that it makes perfect sense, man. That's it's a lot to take in.
It is.
But it is.
It is.
Hey, let's take a short break real quick.
Absolutely.
Does that sound good?
Let's do it.
I don't want to get into the cremation process.
Yes, sir.
All right, man. We're back.
We're back.
We're back. Got us a sip of water.
Absolutely.
We took a potty break. Is that the
bathroom break, water, all the necessities.
That's right.
Of course.
I chose nicotine.
Yes.
Nicotine.
Now I'm a former nicotine person.
No
a lot
kidding.
of us are. Oh, absolutely. You don't work in the restaurant business for as many years as I did and not smoke.
Man, I when I was in the Army, I gave smoking a stint, like a little taste. It wasn't for me, man. It wasn't for me. And it's not good neither. I've dipped for, oh my God, since I was 15 years old.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, it's not it's not a good thing, and I wish I didn't do it.
Well, hey, there's certainly no judgment here. I mean, there's plenty of days that I still am tempted to, pick up a cigarette, start smoking again. So
that's right.
Yeah.
So where we left off at, let's get into cremation. That's very interesting, and I would like to know how that process works, what temperatures it takes to do this, and just kind of what happens after the cremation is done with, all those type of things.
Absolutely.
Hit me with it.
So the way that the paperwork always reads, because again, this is like the respectful, politically correct, whatever. Cremation reduces the body to ash by way of intense heat.
Okay.
That's the way it's described on cremation paperwork. Really, obviously we all know, the body is put into essentially what is a huge oven and is, heated and burned to the point that there's, not that there's nothing left, but I mean, all the organic matter, your skin, your hair, all that just basically kind of burns away. The only thing that's left are, your biggest and thickest and heaviest bones. So like your femur, your bone matter is left. And then that's what is then processed into the fine, what we know as ashes or cremated remains.
Of course.
Temperature-wise, yeah, it's not like you could just start a fire and cremate a body. Like, no. You're talking about 1,800 to 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. for a period
Wow.
of, I mean, somebody like you or me, fairly average size. I mean, I'm kind of big for my height, but, at least a good 3 hours.
No way.
Absolutely.
Now, how many is that? Like, is there multiple flames that are? I've
No,
seen a couple movies, but
there's one flame. There's one flame. Every cremation machine that I've seen and worked with, there's one flame. So kind of at the head end, so where the body is placed into the cremation chamber, at the head end, that's where the flame shoots down from and basically is hitting the body kind of right on the rib cage. And then the flame hits and then kind of spreads down, if you will. So if you're picturing like a long rectangular thing with a body slid into it, so the flame's kind of coming down and burning that way.
wow, I never would have thought that. I would have thought that there's multiple flames coming down at one time, just swarming the body, and then.
And I mean, if that may be, again, I've never experienced it working that way.
Seen it
Every
on movies,
machine,
but possibly Hollywood.
Hollywood does a lot of things. I saw a Hollywood production one time where somebody was actually in a metal casket, and they put that metal casket into a cremation machine as if we were supposed to believe that that metal casket burned up. I mean, it doesn't take, I don't think, somebody even who works in the funeral business to know that that's not possible.
Of course.
But I saw that, and it's a very popular Ryan Murphy production.
How do the ashes go from the chamber into, I guess you would call it an urn, or when I received my dad, it was in a.
Oh, I'm sorry you lost your dad.
Oh, thank you. That was I don't know. I was probably 2014.
Yeah.
I received it in a brown little box.
Yes.
And then, how does that transfer off into that? Is it
so once the cremation is done, and once the part in the chamber is done, so you're basically left with just kind of a pile of whatever is left. At that point, that is all raked out. Again, with everything is done with grace, with dignity. That's all raked out and basically collected.
Okay.
And it looks just like you would. I mean, it literally looks like a pile of bone fragments and pieces. And then all of those pieces are run through. I've heard it called a couple of different things. The term I've heard most often is cremulator, which is basically like a massive. I don't want to say coffee grinder, but that's literally the closest thing you can compare it to. You run the bones through this grinder.
Okay.
And it basically just, through blades and speed and intensity, processes and reduces it down to the fine dust, powdery ash substance that we know of. So then from there, that's all collected and then placed into, whether it's like what you're describing, what you got your dad's ashes back in. They're usually in a bag, like some kind of thick plastic bag that's then put into an urn or a box or whatever. They're usually in a bag. And when I say bag, I mean, we're not talking about Walmart bag. It's like a very thick, heavy plastic, and it's very tightly sealed. But it's just a lot more delicate than just, I mean, think about if you're working with sand, if you were just putting sand into a little box, it's a lot cleaner and more organized, not to mention more respectful, to kind of keep it all contained and then place it into whatever container it's going into.
So I'll tell you something. I find it humorous. So I'll just give you a quick little story of it. So when I found out my dad was killed, I was in the Army down in Savannah, Georgia, and I never had like a long relationship with my dad, and I didn't know it, but he lived in Savannah while I was in the Army. It's the craziest thing, but I didn't know it.
Right.
Well, I lived a little outside of Savannah, but it was still that little vicinity. So he was killed at a like homeless camp type thing when he lived there, and we don't have to get into all the crazy stuff, but when I was given his ashes, I lived in the barracks.
Right.
So I didn't have like a fireplace to go put these on or
Right.
anything wild like that.
Sure.
I had those ashes in that box, and I put them in my closet
Uh-huh.
when I was in the barracks, right?
Yeah.
And I'd always make this joke when I'd have buddies come over, say, "I hope y'all don't mind my dad's in the closet."
Yeah.
And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" No, for real, he's up there on that shit.
Uh-huh.
So there was I ended up having to. I felt it. I ended up. I feel like I wanted. I don't know how to put it. I put him in a lake,
Mm-hmm.
because I felt like you're a part of this earth for so long, and you gave so much to this earth. So to give, I guess you say, to give back to the earth. That's kind of how I done it, but it was also because I didn't have anywhere to keep this.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I don't want to say props to you because it's not like that's appropriate to say, but I appreciate knowing that you felt that compelling conviction to, want to do something
Yeah.
with his ashes.
Yeah.
Because there are a lot of people, and I'm not casting judgment, I'm not saying anything negative, but there are a lot of people who, how many years ago was it you said your dad
It
died?
was in 2014, so I don't do math really
So
good.
11
but
years.
There you go.
There are people who have had
It's
their
a lot faster than I would have said that.
Well, there are people
I
who
would
have
been
had.
like,
Well, you did go to Cass. So. I had to throw a Cass joke in there, and I got the opportunity. 11 years. There are people who have had their loved ones, like close loved ones,
yeah,
mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters, who have had their cremated remains in their possession, in closets, drawers, etc.
Okay.
Like what you're describing, for way longer than 10 years.
Yeah.
And they forget about it.
Yeah.
Or they don't care. Which is really sad. So I was just saying all that to say, and I'm sorry I cut you off. I was just saying all that to say that, I appreciate that you felt that way.
Yeah.
And I appreciate when people do feel that way.
I want to get into real quick the mental health aspect of that job.
Sure.
There's a lot of jobs out there that really affect mental health, and I want to know, because you're surrounded constantly by, I guess you could look at it in two ways. You could look at it as a positive or a negative, but in my head, I feel like it's more of a negative, haunting feeling. So how is the mental health aspect of that job? Does it hurt more people than others, or is it kind of like when you're a nurse or a doctor, you're just used to death and it's just another thing?
I think it's probably some of both. I would absolutely say that different people it affects differently. Different situations affect different people differently. I think kind of overall, yeah, you do probably get pretty used to and pretty accustomed to most of it. But like we said earlier, you may see just when you think you've seen it all, or you've been in the business 40 years, or it's your very first day, you'll see something that the funeral home has never dealt with or experienced before. And that can hit everybody differently. I don't know if this necessarily goes into the mental health part, like kind of what you're talking, but speaking from my own experience, for me, it's helped me to realize and come to grips with, none of this is forever. Any one of us could die tonight, could die tomorrow. I mean, there are people who die every single day who had plans for tomorrow, for next week, etc. I have to. Now, when I say I have to, maybe this is kind of the mental health part of it, because there's a lot of things I've seen that I just flat out don't understand. Okay? We're not going to elaborate, but there's no reason that a parent should ever bury a child. So having to understand things like that for me has caused me to have to accept that there is some sort of bigger picture in play. I may not, well, obviously I don't know all the answers, but I have in my own mind, I have been able to, for the most part, because I do still get thrown off. Don't get me wrong. For the most part, I've been able to make peace with the understanding that I know that there is a bigger plan, a bigger picture, a reason for why things happen the way that they do.
So you have to adapt to it in your head to accept it a little more.
I think, well, for me, yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Because again, you're faced with and confronted with issues and situations that have absolutely no, let's say, earthly explanation behind them. And you just have to, you have to get through it. You've got a family. Keep this in mind. You've got a family that's, you're the funeral business, funeral professional, whatever. It's completely taken you by surprise, thrown you off guard. Think about that family.
Oh, right.
In a lot of cases, you got to be the rock for them.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess, yeah, what I keep coming back to and saying, for me, for my own sanity, for my own peace of mind, my own mental health, whatever, I have to believe that there is a plan of some sort. There's a reason.
You have to, and it's like you said, you have to be that rock. You have to be the smiling face in such a harsh time, and that comfort, because you are the last person that they see before their before their loved one's body is gone from them for good.
Sure.
So I get it.
That may be one of the things that makes me different. This was something I learned in one of my psychology of grief classes that I took. I don't always try to smile.
Okay.
Now, everybody is different. So I'm not saying what I do is right and what somebody else does is wrong.
Exactly.
I'm not saying that. I'm speaking for myself. I give families the space that they need. If they need the space to be really angry, then I just sometimes take the brunt of their anger because they're just angry at what's happened.
Okay.
If somebody is, just out of their mind, inconsolable, sad, I let them experience that. We're so thrown off when people start expressing emotions that we don't exactly know how to react to in that moment. So what I've, at least, I don't want to say I've gotten good at, but what I've become aware of is I just let people have that space. And I'll tell you where it started. Or I say where it started. I'll tell you the first thing that happened to me that really made me see it. It was at the first funeral home that I worked for, which was in Cartersville. We were having a visitation, and there was a lady in the visitation, and it was just family at this point. It was just the family in there privately. And there was a lady sitting off to the side, and she had her head hung down. I mean, she was, wailing, sobbing. I mean, she was just inconsolable. So another lady who was part of this family came up to her, started rubbing her, patting her on the back. And I didn't hear everything that she said, but I did hear at one point this lady who was trying to comfort, she said, "It's going to be okay." Well, the crying lady lifted her head up and she said, "But it's not okay."
Yeah.
And something about that just stuck with me. It's like, this is not okay.
Yeah.
And it's okay that it's not okay.
Of course.
So, again, I speak for myself when I say it's very important to me that I want to make sure that families have whatever space they need. Now, that's a lot prettier said than done. It's a lot easier said than done. But there's nothing wrong with walking up to somebody and just saying, "I'm sorry." Not trying to give any kind of explanation or try to have any kind of conversation, or just saying, "I'm really sorry." So
No, I understand.
that's my little bit about that.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. What if the person is too tall or too big? Do they make certain caskets? What if What if you are just a really tall guy or a really big,
Mm-hmm.
person? Do they make different size caskets for that?
Absolutely. So those are two separate things.
Mm-hmm.
So if somebody's really tall, let's say they're really tall, but dimensionally, so speaking like shoulders, torso, etc., they're pretty average size.
Mm-hmm.
They're just super tall. What I have always seen and the way that I've always experienced it is you work with bending their knees and adjusting their legs appropriately, but then also, caskets are funny creatures. You can adjust the base of caskets, you can raise them, lower them, tilt them, you can do all kinds of things. I like the technical term, is the bed of the casket. That's what it's called.
Okay.
You can adjust the bed in the casket a whole bunch of different ways, which can make a difference in how a person fits into it, especially
Oh.
when they're tall. For someone who's overly large, yes, they do make oversized caskets that are wider widths, and are built to accommodate people with bigger midsections, bigger torsos, etc. Where that becomes, I don't want to say becomes an issue, but where that becomes kind of a real technical thing is whether or not those caskets fit into a singular grave space. Because there is such a thing as caskets that are too big to fit into a single grave space. So a family has to essentially purchase two graves to accommodate one casket.
Oh, wow.
That's a thing, yeah.
What's the craziest thing you've ever seen go inside of a casket, along with the person?
A metal detector.
Wow.
So it's not uncommon. It's not uncommon for
Right.
families to bury.
That must have been their love.
So this gentleman that we buried at the funeral home I worked at the time, he was an avid, he would go on these big, like, legit trips with whatever group it was he was a part of. Maybe he was in I don't know, university research, whatever, but he would go on like excursions and literally, with his metal detector find all kinds of whatever. I don't know. It's not uncommon to put little personal effects in the casket with people, whether it's their Bible, whether it's a stuffed animal, pictures, etc. That's not out of the ordinary at all. But yeah, we buried him with his metal detector.
Is there ever any organs, say eyeballs,
Mm-hmm.
that they were an organ donor?
Mm-hmm.
What do you do in place? Because you said there's things that go inside the eyes. What are some of those things that they're taken out for an organ donor, but you have to accommodate for that?
Yeah, absolutely. With eyes specifically, there's little, there's little mechanisms. I guess the closest thing you could say are, little like ping pong ball type things. I hate to be really graphic, and I know that may be disturbing to some people, but there's little things like that you can use in place of. As far as other organs, or even if it's like bones, because people can donate their bones, there's not always a whole lot that you can do as far as replacing or filling back in. You just have to kind of carefully and delicately and gracefully work with whatever you have. And that is something that funeral homes run into if the individual was an organ donor, or if their family decided they wanted to donate their bones, their whatever. That is something that has to be taken into consideration.
So talking about that, what is one of the? Give me a crazy story.
Like good, humorous crazy, or sad, depressing crazy?
I'm an open book, man. Give me yeah, like just something crazy that's happened. Something that you've seen on the body, something that has happened in the process. Anything. Is there anything that comes to mind there?
There is something that immediately comes to mind, and this probably doesn't fit what you're looking for, but it's the first thing that comes to mind. There was a family that wanted to cremate their loved one, but they didn't want anybody to know that they'd cremated their loved one. So they actually purchased a casket, which they kept closed. So from the outside looking in, it looked like, the casket obviously the body was inside.
Mm-hmm.
But the funeral home had put the cremated remains inside of the casket, and then it proceeded to weigh the casket down with sandbags and other things.
Oh, wow.
And I don't remember what this family's exact gripe was with how they thought the public would perceive the cremation, but it was one of those things they absolutely did not want anybody to know that this person had been cremated. So they did everything, to make it look like it had been a casketed situation, a casketed
Wow.
burial. You see people die and pass away in all kinds of ways that,
What's been your hardest? I guess what has been the hardest? So I know if someone passes away and it's just natural, their body is perfectly fine, it's just a normal day,
Mhm.
right? What is a situation where the body was just really hard to
Well, for
to
me,
put together?
sure, for me personally, I've borne witness to more than one instance where someone that I knew and I knew well ended their own life.
Mm.
And, our funeral home that I was a part of, myself included, obviously, were called in to help take care of things. And there's no way you can ever prepare for, dealing with that. That's, of the things that have been especially hard for me, those were especially hard circumstances to deal with.
Okay.
Because, and that opens the whole door about suicide, which is a whole different podcast discussion. But yeah, for me personally, that, those couple of instances that I've been a part of, again, it's people that I knew well. And again, there's no, here's how you do this or how you deal with this beforehand. It's like it's happened, and then it's like, here you are.
Yeah. If you had to, I know you think about this all the time.
Sure.
You have to think about this all the time because you see it every day. If you had to choose yourself, because I'm sure you have your plans already, just being in that.
Right.
If you had to choose cremation, burial, what would be your go-to and why?
Burial.
Burial.
And
this is just your. This is your.
Correct. This is
Mhm.
me. I'm speaking
Mhm.
for me. I'm not speaking for anybody else. I'm not speaking for any business. I'm not speaking for anybody but myself. To me, burial is what's traditional. Now, I get that some people, embalming, I get where people make the arguments about, we do a lot of non-traditional things in a
Mhm.
traditional process, and I get that. But that's what feels right and proper to me. I don't want to be cremated. If I'm ever given the choice, which I'm not, but if I were to ever have the choice of here's someone and I have to decide whether to bury or cremate them, I would choose to bury them. Because to me, again, it just feels like more of the natural part of it just feels more natural to me. But that's not to say that the other or that any other alternatives are not natural. Everybody, it's a very personal thing that when you do stop and think about it, you have, whether you know it or not or like it or not, you have a feeling about it.
Of course.
And that's okay.
What happens to bodies that are unidentified?
So I've never seen or been a part of a situation where a body was just clearly 100% no name John Doe. I have seen a few, where there was, a homeless or no family type of situation.
Correct.
And that's where there's a lot of legal stuff that gets involved. You have to make certain measures in terms of attempting to find said person's next of kin or any family at all, and basically let them know what's happened, and then kind of try to get them to take part in making this person's final arrangements. It may be a case where the family doesn't want to, or the family forgot that person even existed, or whatever. Or it may even be, someone's second cousin by marriage, and so they don't even know this person, but they're literally the only relative that you can find. There's a lot of lengths you have to go to try to accomplish that. If you're not able to accomplish that, then normally what happens is there's some sort of court intervention process
Okay.
where a funeral home goes to a court of law, and usually with the coroner or whomever kind of, along with them, and basically presents the case of, what they have, and in terms of the person they have, the measures that they've taken to try to identify the person's next of kin, family, and then the court determines, what happens to the body. Basically, either they say, to bury the body, it's such and such, or they sign off on, like a cremation. But it's them deciding, the funeral home or anybody like that. Nobody's making that decision, like in lieu of the family, if you will. It becomes a very legal, very strict, specific thing in different states.
Mm-hmm.
Different laws. Probably, I know even there's differences between some of the counties as far as how you go about doing that.
Yeah.
But it's definitely not an easy process, and it's not one that you ever want to find yourself in, because it can get really stressful and really sad.
Mm-hmm.
Because at the end of it, you realize that you're trying to help arrange for someone who literally doesn't have.
Has there ever been a situation where you almost had to refuse there to be an open casket? Maybe because there's something, a part of the body that is just, it's really hard to make it presentable?
That I've ever been a part of,
Mm-hmm.
no.
Okay.
Every instance like what you're describing that I've been a part of, the families have been fully aware of what happened, what's going on, etc. And so they wanted, or they agreed to, however you want to say it, to keep the casket closed.
So it's usually pretty mutual then?
For the most part.
Okay.
I have known of situations where funeral homes, where families, told the funeral home that they wanted to have an open casket regardless. And, irrespective of the specific trauma, the funeral homes have not refused, but I've known of funeral homes that have basically presented families with legal documents saying, okay, this is us saying we've advised you not to open the casket. And this is us telling you that we're not going to assume any liability for how you or your loved ones or your friends react to what you do or don't see in the casket.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I've known of that to happen before.
Okay.
And whether or not that's necessary, whether or not that's a good thing, that's up to somebody's interpretation. But I have known of it to get that. I've known of it to go that far and to get that specific before.
There's two more things that I really want to ask. Because obviously in this world now, it is very, very, everything's expensive.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So when you get into the kind of the financial aspect of it, I know it comes down to, I guess you would say, affordability, what someone can afford, but what is your typical funeral cost for a family?
Burials, nowadays, if we're talking traditional, meaning, visitation, funeral service, the normal kind of merchandise you see, so like a guest book for guests to sign in, memorial folders that you print out, a casket, obviously, all of that nowadays, you're comfortably probably going to be anywhere between the $10,000 to the $20,000 range, depending on what you select, depending on what you do.
What is the most expensive casket?
The most expensive casket? So there's I know several celebrities. Michael Jackson was one of them. I believe it was called, if it's not still called, the Gold Promethean caskets made by Batesville, which is a big casket company.
Oh, yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
And it's like into the six figures. I mean, it's well over $100,000.
No kidding.
Mm-hmm.
I think I want a Dell Earnhardt casket.
Oh, yeah.
That would be sick.
I have. Okay, so I've never seen Dale Earnhardt, but when I lived in Birmingham, I went in not just one, but more than one casket selection room in Birmingham and funeral homes in Birmingham that had Alabama football themed casket with houndstooth
It made them happy.
interiors. I mean, seriously,
That's got to be cool.
absolutely.
I
Well,
just
it
want.
is cool because it's like it's reflective of who that
Yeah,
person
yeah.
was.
I think I want Raise Hell, Praise Dale
Absolutely.
on the side,
A big number 3, just kind of right in the middle.
and then right on the edge, it says, "But I'm going to heaven."
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. And
That would be cool.
we can bury you with a number 3 hat. You know, just absolutely Dale Earnhardt you all the way. Dale Earnhardt you up into heaven is what we do.
I don't know. It would be tough. I think it would be between a Dale Earnhardt casket and an
Mhm.
Atlanta Braves casket. That'd be pretty sick.
See, that's what's near and dear to my heart.
Yeah.
I'm a huge Braves fan.
Me too.
Going back to, my legacy with my grandparents, my grandfather especially. The Braves always hold a very, very
Yeah.
special near and dear place in my heart for sure.
Last but not least, before I let you get out of here, man.
Oh, it's good.
What is the let's get into this tri-state scandal. So
That rocked the whole world.
For anybody that doesn't understand it, kind of break that down.
Well, first of all, it was just right up the road here. It was literally just right up in Noble, Georgia.
Noble, Georgia. Okay.
Which is kind of, if you look at the map, Dalton, where I live, is pretty well kind of up in the corner. Noble is a little farther west in the corner, so it's within a stone's throw of Tennessee and Alabama. It's just right up in there. And it was a family-owned business, a family-owned crematory that did a lot of cremations for a lot of funeral homes in Georgia and that part of Tennessee and Alabama, hence the tri-state. And it ended up being uncovered in 2002 that crematory and that crematory operator hadn't cremated all of the bodies that were entrusted into his care.
Wow.
And at the end of the day, after lots of, if you're watching this and you really want to know about tri-state, Google and YouTube to your heart's desire, and you will probably see things that you never even conceived or imagined. Literally, legitimately. But at the end of the day, it was about 334 bodies that were recovered. That over the course of when that crematory operator who was part of the family took over the business in 1996, from 96 to 02, and he cremated a lot of bodies in that time. Well over 1,000, but there was 334 that they found scattered about the property in different forms and fashions.
No way.
Uh-huh.
Oh my gosh. Do you think it was just did something break, or was it?
So that was kind of what what everybody has always wanted to know is, what the hell?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what happened? Because it's not like he didn't cremate anybody. He cremated way more people than he didn't cremate. So it was like, okay, was it malfunctioning equipment? Well, apparently the equipment had some issues, but it was all in working order. And there were things that he had let go and left unaddressed with respect to his equipment. But there's never been a conclusive reason or definition or theory given as to why he did or why he didn't do.
Where's the guy now?
He served a jail sentence and he's out of jail.
Oh, really?
I don't know. I honestly don't know where he lives or what he does. I would imagine.
How long was he in jail, I wonder?
I think it was like 12 years.
And
So tri-state changed a lot of things.
Okay.
Namely, a lot of things with regards to the law and how you treat a human body. There were already laws in place about what you can and can't do, but there were certain things in terms of what is misdemeanor level, what is felony level. A lot of that was re-examined, and a lot of that was changed as a result of tri-state, which is, again, why I think he was brought up on 787 counts against him, and he served 12 years.
Oh my
So,
gosh. Well, and and it also brings up. I think it also brings up our morals
uh-huh,
in America
uh-huh.
because it's like you said, there was laws that were formed because of that. It shows the morals that we have in America because some of these other third world countries,
Mm-hmm.
God knows. I mean,
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I mean, now you know, I guess you would say as years progressed, we've figured a lot more things out,
Mm-hmm.
but I mean, for instance, the Etowah Indian mounds.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the Civil War.
Absolutely.
Um,
Which that's how Civil War, kind of sidetracking back to what we said, that was how embalming really became a thing, was because of the Civil
no
War.
kidding.
Yeah. They were so I say became a thing. The way that embalming kind of became a standard practice, if you will,
Yeah.
is there were embalmers who would travel from battle to battle and for a fee would embalm the bodies of soldiers so that they could withstand whatever the trip home was, so they could be sent back home to their loved ones, and their loved ones then have whatever services they wanted to have. But that's how embalming, that's in America, that's how embalming worked its way into the mainstream
Mm.
culture that we have. And President Lincoln as well. President Lincoln was embalmed, and he was trained around from city to city where people could come by and pay their respects. And that's, yeah.
Unbelievable. Would you have fun?
Did I have fun? Hell
Yeah.
yeah, it's been great.
Sweet, man.
Did you?
Oh yeah, absolutely. You taught me a lot. There's a lot that I didn't understand in that realm, and I think that I think some of us try to not think about that,
Sure.
you know. But there's a lot that I didn't know, and I thought it was really cool to hear some of that,
Well,
and
I'm
to get to
glad.
hear your side of it, and to see your love for it, because there's not somebody has to do it,
Uh-huh.
and luckily it's somebody that takes pride in it.
Yeah.
Well, man, I really appreciate you coming up here. You had a long drive to come up here and see us,
It was
and
great. I would have done it in a heartbeat, and it's been great. I
and this is
appreciate it.
this is an upcoming podcast, man, and I'm really enjoying it, and it seems to have a lot of good feedback from people, and like I said, I'm very grateful you came.
Well, thank you.
Thank
Thank
you,
you for
sir.
having me.
Appreciate you, Jay.
Yes, sir.